So, I've been rewatching The Walking Dead. I'm a rewatcher. And the first time I watched it like a few years ago, I was like, is this a metaphor for the Republicans like coming after us and trying to like revert us back to prehistory? The answer is yes. I just got to the scene the other day where Lori gets pregnant. Oh my God, so she gets pregnant, has someone go scavenge abortion pills for her, probably Mifepristone. So she takes them and then she throws them up and then Rick finds out, baby daddy finds out, and he starts getting fucking furious at her for having even considered aborting his baby, and he's losing his mind at her. And meanwhile, it's like they're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. And he's just like railing and railing about her as though even on a good day, giving birth is just some easy, quiet thing you can just boop, boop, and then run from zombies after. Please. And like, this is to the woman he supposedly loves. It's all about him. So, moral of the story is that 1, Rick is being a patriarchal fucking prick, and 2, giving birth in a Republican zombie apocalypse is lethal.
Tea. A cup of tea.
Tea time.
Tea.
What's the tea, sis?
No tea, no shade.
Hot tea.
Queens. Hello. I am Mama D, and welcome to the Queen's Tea, our new radical feminist, I know, bear with me, hear me out, show and podcast, launching today, Mother's Day 2024. I've retired my kazoo for this occasion. So, Mother's Day 2024. First of all, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers who celebrate. On today's show, we're going to be talking about mothers and all the motherfuckers out there trying to fuck mothers over. On this episode, we'll discuss the Supreme Court's decisions from this season pertaining to abortion and women's rights laws, including the case Idaho versus the United States, which unfortunately is likely to undermine the federal law EMTALA, which is very important for our medical rights. This decision also will likely create another precedent for state laws about health care, superseding federal laws and federally protected rights. This raises such pertinent questions as, are these states united or not? And is my health a human right, a civil right, or is it something to be left up to the whims of extremist state legislators? On this episode, we'll also discuss the various realities of motherhood and their implications for and in a capitalist system such as ours. As in, you want me to do what, society, and you're gonna reward me how? And for our Queen's Tea Party today, I'm very excited to welcome to the Sneaky Speakeasy Brooklyn-based writer and competitive powerlifter, JENIKA McCRAYER. And she's going to be joining us to discuss her latest article for the horror and cult film magazine, Fangoria: Maternal Misgivings from Ambivalent to Monstrous Mothers in Horror. We're going to be talking about mother archetypes from horror films and from life. And last but not least, we'll serve Queen's Hot Tea, where JENIKA will join me in discussing all of the crazy women-hating shit going on from the last few weeks that has been making our blood boil. But before we get started, this being our very first episode of the Queen's Tea, what the heck is a radical feminist show, huh? Well, as you may have noticed, the world is going to shit. And systems upon which we are all dependent, and which were designed with so few of us in mind, civilizing systems that allegedly allow for our pursuit of happiness, and the growth of our wealth, and the expansion of our freedoms, they are, unsurprisingly, and by design, failing almost all of us. For us here in the US who were sold the American delusion, I mean the American dream, that freedom and success and happiness equal wealth accumulation through greed and rugged individualism and cutthroat competition and resource hoarding at all costs. Well, here we are in the 21st century, and we find ourselves with next to no societally insured infrastructure, no guaranteed health care, shelter, food, clean water, child care, basic income, education, environmental safety, and decreasing human rights, protections, and civil liberties. Hello, completely illegitimate Supreme Court and state courts. And we also find ourselves here in the US with no sense of community or communal identity with our fellow Americans, let alone with anyone else in the world. And these political divisions that everyone is so quick to reference, they are the result of an entire nation of people being taught that their neighbors are their competitors or different, their enemies, instead of their collaborators and community. So if any of this stuff is ringing true to you or sounding like, oh yeah, Z, that might be something I'm into too, I agree, or I want to know more, then you just may be a radical feminist, and you're going to need to watch the Queen's Tea. But D, why radical feminism? Well, I'm going to use a word here, the P word, patriarchy. Now listen, relax. All patriarchy means is the domination by men of women, the domination by patriarchs of women. Patriarchal systems are where the dominators, the people with the power over others, are men. That's it. Nearly every single culture in the world is patriarchal. Nearly every government in the world is patriarchal. Nearly every religion in the world is patriarchal. And this is a problem because not only does it completely and arbitrarily fuck over women in excluding them from power at the whims of men. I'm sorry, who actually made y'all again? But it's also fucked up because as a system of domination, it entails that there will always be those who are dominated over, people forced into submission, people who are subordinate, lesser, inferior to those the system declares supreme. Patriarchy is necessarily a system of supremacy. Patriarchy is a system where men reign supreme. We're used to the term white supremacy, which thankfully doesn't exist anymore. I'm kidding, it totally exists, very important and horrible, as we're very aware of these days, especially since it's a very large contingent of the Republican Party, one of our only two. But it's not just white supremacy or racial supremacies that are a problem. It's also Christian supremacy. It's wealth supremacy. Now, it's not just the P word we're going to use here because it's not just a gender issue. What we're really talking about over here in the land of radical feminism is the expression coined by radical feminist queen Bell Hooks. White supremacist capitalist Christian patriarchy. About this term, Bell Hooks said, I began to use the phrase in my work because I wanted to have some language that would actually remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality and not to just have one thing like gender or race as the only important issues. For me, the use of that phrase was a shortcut way of saying all of these things that are actually functioning simultaneously at all times in our lives. And that if I really want to understand what is happening to me right now at this moment in my life, I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking at it through, and she goes on to say, any one of these one lenses. What Bell Hooks means in using this big composite term, white supremacist capitalist Christian patriarchy, is that we need to be looking at the intersection of all of these dynamics of domination and supremacy at once to truly understand the nature of our existences, our oppressions, and our internalized supremacies. And that's what radical feminism is. It is an analytical framework for understanding these interlocking dynamics. We need new systems. We need new constitutional rights, federally guaranteed rights that state laws cannot chip away at, that insane white supremacist or Christian supremacist or whoever supremacist Republicans cannot take away from us. We need revolutionary radical feminism. But D, why does it have to be feminist, this revolution? Well, lots of reasons. One, change is a numbers game. It's built into the Constitution in terms of how we can vote and elect people to represent us and therefore put our views forward and advance our visions of the world. And it's also how you keep people in line and power in check. We got the numbers. Women are half of the world population, and that's just the women. Yes, there can be women patriarchs. Let's just take a moment to note that. I am not saying all women are feminists or all women are even good people. There can absolutely be women who act in the way that benefits men. That's a big problem with all of this too. So I already know your objection and we're going to talk about it more another time. Okay. At root, domination culture begins in the home. It begins from watching mommy and daddy and the mommies and daddies around us and what is reinforced or admonished inside and outside the home from when we are very, very, very young. And because these domination cultures begin in patriarchy, they facilitate and lead to the other ones. Because this initial gendering and othering and deciding that one person is more supreme than the other, this establishment of a power imbalance creates the starting point for all the other versions of supremacy, othering, and power imbalances. And if you cannot see male supremacy, which is around us everywhere and seeped into everything we do from the beginning of our little pink and blue lives, then how can we purge supremacy culture, domination culture from our lives writ large? How can we have a new vision of the future, redesign of these systems? So what is a radical feminist vision of the future? It's one where supremacy is not baked into the cake. And that's what we're going to be exploring here on this show. We're going to be talking about this and getting into the nuances of it and getting into these intersections and how they affect all sorts of people, not just here in the US, but around the world. Because like we said, this is not a unique condition. So in patriarchy, where it's a domination culture, all the versions, white, supremacist, capitalist, Christian, patriarchy, picture a triangle. Right? It's a very top-down model where there's power concentrated at the top and then there's all the rest of us with varying levels of power and at different times varying amounts of power underneath this centralized and smaller power structure. And but it's like, why? There's so many more of us. Why do we allow this to happen? Well, most basic tactic in the world, conquer and divide. They keep us all fighting and, oh, we're so different. No, we're not. We're united under this patriarchal nonsense and this supremacy culture shit that I've just been explaining to you. And if we only knew that, I think it would take like 3% of us to get rid of this nonsense and reset this shit. So change is a numbers game. Again, we have to think in terms of how we check this shit. We got to get on the same page. So instead of this pyramid, instead of this kingdom structure, instead of this top-down pyramid, what I suggest, it's not about some people are using the term matriarchy. I don't love that term either because I think it's too easy to envision a system then where we're just replacing these people at the top with, instead of men, women. And that's not what we're talking about either. What we're talking about in radical feminism is a rejection of this pyramidal structure altogether. What we're talking about instead, I want you to think of a web. I want you to think of us taking this and flattening it the hell down and thinking about it being decentralized and having lots of different points of leadership. And what connects us all, these common values of respecting each other, allowing for each other's freedoms, but also making sure we're not being fucking destructive pricks who are hoarding power or hoarding whatever it is that could possibly undermine this beautiful and delicate web structure. So, kingdom, and what I call the web, with all these little centers, queensdom. It's the queensdom. I know that might be corny, but whatever, we need mnemonic devices because saying white supremacist, capitalist, Christian patriarchy is a lot. It's a lot. I know. I believe in us. We're going to get there. But, you know, queensdom. Enough of this shit. Okay? Let's get on the same page. Oh, but D, then you're just talking about like a different kind of I already talked about this, how leadership is going to be diffuse and how we check it. That's the whole idea behind the United States is checking centralized power. So it's pretty ironic that we've ended up back at a pyramid instead of a model where power is much more decentralized and diffuse and less extreme. Another objection is like, but gee, resources are limited. So isn't that going to like kick in our kind of animalistic sense of like competing for limited resources? First of all, shut the fuck up. Okay, no, you don't. What did we say? Change is a numbers game. If you have enough people to keep those people in check, just picture what's going to happen when these hordes, these capitalists with like all of our money, all of our wages, that's essentially what it all is, and the wages of people around the world that we've outsourced like effectively slave labor to. Just imagine we start getting really hungry. Or when our resources really are limited because we haven't taken these issues seriously and we're all knocking at their doors. You think that their freaking gates and their technology are going to get them out of the fact that there are so many more of us? Who usually wins the battle? It's the people usually with the most boots on the ground. Not asses in the seats. I messed that up before, but it's fine. Another objection is like, oh, but D, you know, there are limited resources. That's what climate change is teaching us. And so won't that just like kick in our animal self-preservation urge to like fight for them and hoard them? Not if you design this stuff right. Not if we all, and not if you design it right, and not if we can, and not if we create a culture where we actually respect each other and care about each other, and actually don't want to see other people dying and living these horrible, miserable lives just because we don't want to share a little bit. You gotta be a piece of shit to think like this. And a lot of people do, especially here in America, and it's a problem and we need to change it from the ground up. But also, let's be real with this technology business. We live in a society now that's trying to solve climate change and global warming by sending little like reflective mirrors up into the atmosphere, or like taking some of us to a new colony on Mars. I'm pretty sure that in this context, we can come up with enough innovation and enough way of saving and preserving and expanding the use of the resources we have such that we can still pursue this sharing, communal vision. I know, how radical. Now, will this be easy? No. Of course it's not going to be easy. What the hell is easy in life? What does that even mean? Will it be excruciating and slow? And in order to achieve it, will we be forced to vote for people in our very limited and very not particularly helpful governmental system? Forced to vote for people that we don't really like in order to keep the progress and the strategy going? Yeah, that is the reality. But in the words of Queen Bell Hooks, to be truly visionary, we have to root our imagination in our concrete reality while simultaneously imagining possibilities beyond that reality. You got to play both games at once. The short-term reality and dealing with the choices you actually have in front of you while headed really as efficiently and as wholeheartedly as possible towards that revolutionary, radical idea and vision of what you want your life to be. So if this has your ears all perked up and you're excited about what I'm talking about, if it's clicking with some of the stuff you already know, if you're like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about this, I've never really thought about this, I wasn't taught this in school. Shocking. And if you want to be a part of this community that we're building here on YouTube, all the social platforms, and on Discord, then please like and follow and share and subscribe and support all of this stuff we're up to with the Queen's Tea and the Foundation and the cocktail party. And on that note, I welcome you to the Queensdom. So hello, and welcome back to the Queen's Tea. I'm Mama D, and today, on our Mother's Day episode, I'd like to discuss we're going to leave aside the whole state of children in this country and what happens after the motherhood part, because that's a whole other show. But what I'd like to discuss today is the state of motherhood in the United States of America. Oof. Now, listen, every day there are new rulings and laws and like these crazy Republican extremist things that are happening that are ruining our lives. So it's too much to cover here. Fear not, I'm not going to try to Jim Carrey and just and go for the whole gold. So it is too much to cover here, but what we can recommend for you on our social media feed, particularly on our Instagram, we follow a lot of really, really, really good news sites and feminist causes, and it's a great way to keep abreast, but to keep a tittied of the whole situation, okay? So our social media handle is at thequeenstea.media. That's our handle for most of the platforms. I think on Discord, we're just at the Queen's Tea. I will be using Discord more as I learn how to. So headlines for our Mother's Day episode. We're going to focus on the two really big Supreme Court cases from this past term that deal with women's health, reproductive justice, access to bodily autonomy, as well as other things. But the thing to know generally about the Supreme Court, especially as we're nearing the end of the term. So the Supreme Court of the United States or SCOTUS, that's the abbreviation, is in session starting in October every year through usually mid to late June the following year. And then they go on summer recess, like it's middle school. And sometimes they'll release rulings and their opinions throughout the year as they go, but oftentimes, particularly when the rulings are very controversial, as they are these days with this illegitimate Republican supremacist court, what they'll usually do is wait until just before they go on recess to just dump all of the decisions. So these two cases were heard in March and April respectively, but we still don't have rulings on them, and we likely won't until June. The first case is the Mifepristone birth control pill Comstock Act law case. It goes by Comstock Acts and laws. They're interchangeable, is my understanding. So the second case is the case about EMTALA, Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And that's a federal act that guarantees us the right to be treated as emergent patients at hospitals without the hospitals being allowed to turn us away because we don't have insurance or because they don't like us. They have to treat us, stabilize us before they're allowed to do anything else. It requires hospitals to do that because, as you might not be surprised to hear, there used to be a time when, I don't know, shithead and mean people at these facilities would just be like, oh, I don't like that person, so I'm just not gonna help them, even though they're dying, even though they're in a health crisis and they're emergent. EMTALA, very important. But let's go to the first case, the Mifepristone case from March. Okay, so the full name of the case is the FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine and Danso Laboratories, LLC, versus the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. Whatever that is. Okay, in this case, here's what's at stake. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and their regulatory actions and independence are at risk of being overruled by this decision. It's based on their approvals of Mifepristone usage that they made in the past since they approved the drug overall in 2000. The plaintiffs are like, we don't like what you're doing with Mifepristone, and now we're gonna challenge your entire legitimacy. The main crux here, and this is where the Comstock Act really kicks in. Part of what the plaintiffs are alleging against the FDA is that they do not have the right to approve the mailing and the shipment of Mifepristone within the United States. Because the Comstock Act were a set of federal laws from 1873, okay, 150 years ago. Are you fucking kidding me? That are still in the books. We still haven't knocked that zombie law off the books, right? That's why it's important when these weird laws come up and we're like, they're doing what now? That's not important. Yes, it is, because they can be weaponized. If they're still on the books, they're still technically rule of law. Okay, so this one, Comstock Act from 1873, still in the books. And what this law does, it is, in part, it criminalizes the mailing and circulation of obscene literature and articles of immoral use, which includes obscenity, contraceptives, abortifacients, sex toys, personal letters. What are you gonna have to make your own dildos now? It's tragic. Personal letters with any sexual content or information, or any information regarding the above information. So textbooks that talk about sexual education wouldn't be allowed to be mailed should the government, the federal government, start enforcing this law, the Comstock Acts. So this is a zombie law that has almost never been enforced in recent history, but this is how it could get resurrected should the SCOTUS case decide in favor of the plaintiffs and against the FDA. The way this law would be enforced, because it's a federal law, is that the federal government, with elected prosecutors, so whoever the president is of the United States, whoever gets elected president, elects their prosecutors and elects that level of attorney, and they can start suing on a federal level and in federal courts people who are violating the Comstock Act. Now, no one's done this before, but we live in unprecedented times. And actually, I believe it's regardless of the Supreme Court's decision in this case. Should Trump get re-elected president, I can't believe I have to say or elected, he would be allowed to pick his whole prosecutorial team, all of his federal attorneys. And if they wanted to, they could start going after people who commit any of these crimes as dictated by the Comstock Act. So this is a nice 2024 election reminder and warning that it really matters whom we elect into these offices. And if we don't block Trump and all of these crazy supremacist Republicans from office, they can and likely will, they tell you who they are, believe them, they will start resurrecting the Comstock Act and going after people for all sorts of stuff. The second case from this term that's really important that was just heard in April is Idaho versus the United States. It's also Moyle versus the United States. I think Moyle versus the United States was the Texas case, and they've been combined. So what happened is these two states, Idaho, the state, and then Moyle, some kind of Texas representative, they've been sued by the Biden administration because they don't want to recognize EMTALA. They want to have their state laws regarding healthcare and the medical treatment of pregnant people and women to supersede the federal law of EMTALA, the Federal Emergency and Medical Treatment and Labor Act. I said it before, it's fine. You know I know how to say it. Okay, so here's the layout of this one. It's a 40-year-old law, federal law that prevents patient dumping. It prevents hospitals from being able to turn you away because you don't have insurance or they don't like the cut of your jib. Idaho says they don't want to do it. They say our doctors shouldn't be allowed to do this because we have this, they have a full abortion ban except for in the case of the life of the mother. So Idaho and Texas both have extreme abortion bans on the books that basically say, unless the life of the mother is at risk, you're not allowed. It is illegal to perform an abortion. And the medical professionals are at risk of being jailed or having their medical licenses that they took decades to have and be able to use, to have them taken away from them. So as we all know, and we've seen in states that have these extreme abortion laws, they don't give a shit about the life of the mother. And there are two things happening here, right? First of all, what constitutes the life of the mother? Does she literally have to be on her death's gurney in order to be treated? What if she could suffer all sorts of other complications? She could lose not only her reproductive health, she could have brain damage, and who knows what other issues could happen. To wait for no reason, wait just so that the treatment of her meets this criterion. But also the psychology of the medical professionals, when they have these people coming into their care who are suffering, and they're like, their initial medical training would be like, oh my God, let me help this person, of course, that's what I'm here for. But instead, now they have to think about the repercussions for themselves and for their professions, because they could be jailed. And these are activist Republicans who are even bringing forth these cases. So you know they're coming. In the same way we know that the Trump administration's elected attorneys general and prosecutors will start enforcing the Comstock Act, we know that these crazy state Republicans will also start going after doctors and medical professionals where there's any wiggle room to charge them with not having waited till the life of the mother was at risk in order to help her, save her, stabilize her, and treat her according to this federal law, EMTALA, as well as the Hippocratic Oath. So this whole setup between these two cases, I think, are really interesting to show how full of shit the fucking Republicans are. Because they're the party of like, oh, states' rights, when it's convenient for them, as is the case in Idaho v. United States and Moyle v. United States. There they want to claim states' rights. But when it comes to the Mifepristone case and the FDA versus that whole plaintiff batch, where the Comstock Act is in play, they're going to be like, well, yeah, you states, maybe some of you states came up with ways around the Comstock Act criminalizations, but you know what? We have the federal branch and we're going to come after you and prosecute you anyway. So like, which one is it? Which one is actually our ideology here, Republicans? What do we actually believe? Do we believe, is it about states' rights or is it about federal tyranny? I don't know. You sound like big fucking hypocrites. What else is new? So beyond just the horrors that these states' laws and the implications from these decisions will cause and continue to cause for women and other people at large in this country, I think we have insight here into this bigger structural problem in the United States, which is this confrontation between states' rights and federal rights. And when we're talking about things like human rights and civil liberties and rights that you and I and everyone should have regardless of where they live, it's pretty shocking to think that we're going to allow these fundamental things to be left up to the decisions and the activism and that shittery of these crazy Republicans. Shouldn't our rights be guaranteed in such a way that they're impermeable to these legal challenges? Shouldn't my right to health care be something that I have regardless of whether or not I live on this side of a border or the other side of the border? I feel like fucking Chappelle in Men in Tights.
I'm on one side, I'm on the other side.
And it brings up this bigger question of what do we want our country to be? What is our vision for what we want this country to be and do for us? Do we want to have certain things protected for all because we all agree in this basic standard of humanity, of human rights, of human decency? Or are we going to do this crazy, competitive, weird, gamey thing that too many people are into where we're, I don't know, what's it called again? Trying to dominate other people and trying to hoard power from them because we have some fucking crazy insecurity complex where we think we need and have to prove ourselves by reigning supreme. I mean, this is the same mentality of a frigging toddler who's like, but mom. So like we said, the Republican Party, the Republican supremacists, they are not interested in a unified nation. So going back to our favorite term from this show, what is it again? White supremacist, capitalist, Christian, patriarchy. What does this have to do with the Republican Party, you say, besides in all the ways I just described in terms of them trying to have power over everyone else? Let's break down this coalition of the Republican Party. There are three main groups. We have the Reagan Republicans, who are wealth supremacists. What these people care about most is their taxes, their money, and making sure they get as much of it as possible. Then we have the MAGA Republicans, who are white supremacists, because, my God, look at any rally and it's so clear. And then third, we have the Christian extremists in the Republican Party, the evangelicals, whatever you want to call them, and these are Christian supremacists. I'm going to save this whole talk on Christian extremists for another episode, but I'm just going to leave you with like a little crumb. Google dominionism. Google dominionist Christianity. When I say Christian supremacy, these are literally people who want to recreate God's world order here on earth in America. When you're done Googling Dominionist Christian, Google 7 Mountain Mandate. This is important to understand because the Speaker of the House right now, Mike Johnson, is a Dominionist Christian. He is an actual, straight by the book, Christian supremacist. And he is number 2 in line with our super, super duper old president. Hop, skip, and a jump away from the presidency. That's crazy. That's a crazy, crazy, crazy concentration of power in Christian supremacist hands. So we've got these three groups. And what do they have in common besides just plain old supremacy? That other one, what is it called again? Patriarchy. They all hate fucking women. Why? Because they can get more power. The people who are power hungry in these groups, they can concentrate and gain more power by excluding half the fucking population, right? It's that numbers game we talked about. And it's already so baked into the cake, of course they fucking hate women. You think the people who want to deny women the right to medical treatment when they're in one of the most vulnerable positions they could ever be in, which is pregnancy, you think those people give a fuck about women? Yet another way that the Republican Party is full of shit and really just power mongering and ruining our lives for their own gain and supremacy is this little tidbit. It's their hypocrisy as it pertains to capitalism. Oh, we care about money and small government and good profits for business. This is kind of the Reagan Republican argument, right? Their priorities, their wealth supremacy. But you know, I live in capitalism. And I was supposed to have children like every woman in this world, apparently. And I just find this huge contradiction, this huge hypocrisy as it pertains to the American standing towards motherhood, towards childbirth, towards having children, towards raising children, towards the family at large. And it's like, you're telling me you want me to donate my body to the reproduction of your labor force. You want me to use my energy. You want me to use my brain power, all of this labor, this reproductive labor towards reproducing yet another laborer. You also want me to spend how much on health insurance to deliver a baby? What's that statistic again? I know it varies, but it can be tens to thousands of dollars, and that's if everything goes right. So you want me to take not only the physical and the mental, but the financial cost of just the act itself. Not to mention, you're not going to give me any time to heal. You're not going to compensate me while I am necessarily healing. You're telling me I have to take time off of work if I want to do it myself. unpaid. What else do I have to do? I feel insane because no one's helping me, and I probably didn't have a good appreciation of just how fucked I would be by society and by all of the systems that I am dependent upon after having birth. So there I am at home, not making money, not sleeping. I might have a shitty fucking husband who's absent if I even have a husband, or partner, usually husband. And then I have to do the great, can I afford childcare to go and work for the same amount of money that childcare would cost debate? Like that fucking makes any sense. So that I can weigh continuing my career and the things that I enjoy outside of the home, or maybe just having some peace and like some time to myself away from my new child. Not because I don't love it, but because Jesus Christ, babies are a lot. I have to debate that and pursuing that and maintaining that at no financial gain, most likely, and at the cost of not having any flexibility to spend time with my new child, or just leaving the child with whomever I can desperately find to take care of them, because maybe I don't have extended family, or maybe they don't live near me, or maybe I just don't have a community that's set up for this kind of thing, for child-rearing peoples to help each other and communally take care of each other so that every now and then someone gets a motherfucking day off. So you're telling me I have to go through this whole big debate, investing all of this into the process of having children, into the act of motherhood. And it costs $250,000. $250,000, $250,000 before college, which usually costs that much. This was from the 2017 U.S. Department of Agriculture study. To raise a kid, that's already data that's 6 years old, 7 years old. $250,000. Who earns this kind of money besides people who are already in these very secure salary shoots? And even they are getting laid off increasingly because, of course, automation and the fact that efficiency, we just don't need that many people doing all of these things. And then not to forget about our good friend, Mr. AI. So explain the math to me there, how you expect people to be able to afford to have kids, especially when they're paying out the ass for every other, how much are diapers? How much was formula? How much, where's the money coming from? Explain the math. And so, all of this cost that I'm incurring, physical, mental, and financial, this is household labor theory, guys. We're going to talk about that more as we go down the road. But it's never been accounted for. Even Marx, the greatest critic of capitalism, he left this part out in his theories about the reproduction of the labor force. He did not account for the actual financial cost of all of this female labor, this mother labor that went into reproducing the next labor force. It wasn't just the kind of societal, the cost of education, food, etc. It was also the time and the teaching a kid how to wipe his own fucking ass and tie his shoe. You think he's gonna be useful at work if he doesn't know how to do that? Come on. And if this is capitalism, and if time equals money, what the fuck is the ROI? Where's my money, baby? Where's my money? Where's my paycheck? This is my question. Because in capitalism, the argument is usually, the logic is that we're incentivized through the possibility of gain, accruing wealth, through gaining more status, through increasing our market power. But if all I'm doing is paying for this privilege of motherhood, and if even at the other side of it, there's nothing besides this baby that I now have to take care of in such a vulnerable and exposed financially, mentally, familially way, what the fuck is the ROI? What is my incentive? What is my incentive to go through all of these processes? Because yes, I'm gonna love my kid, but you're telling me what love conquers all. What is this, a fucking Disney movie? No, this is reality. So this is my ultimate argument to anyone in America who's either real pro-capitalist or real Reagan Republican or thinks they're real, the free market. You want us to have kids? You want these birth rates to go up? You want all of these women and birthing peoples who are decreasingly having kids, who are choosing increasingly not to engage in this kind of a vision for their lives, in this kind of life decision? You want us to do all of that, Mr. Capitalism? Uncle Sam? You want me to invest all of these parts of me and my life and my vision for my life and my future and just the stress of worrying about a new human being that I brought into a world that's fucking melting? You want me to do that, America? Then you know what? Fucking incentivize me, bitch. Joining us today in Queens, all the way from Brooklyn, New York, is JENIKA McCRAYER.
Thank you.
This Pisces originally hails from Norfolk, Virginia. Did you like my accent? I don't know if I said it right. Did I say it
You
right?
said it perfectly.
All the Southerners are going to be like, no. JENIKA writes about horror, gender, and labor, and is happiest when she gets to write about all three together. Her work has been featured in Prison Reports, in Horror Press, and in Gaily Dreadful. JENIKA, in her spare time, we understand, is a gamer, a bookworm, and a power lifter. JENIKA, thank you so much for coming today. This has been so lovely. I wanted to show everyone the fabulous magazine, Fangoria. If you're into horror film and cult classics, this is a really beautiful magazine. And JENIKA, you are the writer of the Women in Horror column, correct?
Yes.
Fabulous. And I really wanted to have you on today because you wrote about mothers, and you wrote about motherhood as represented in horror films, including a few really like cult classics, obviously, Fangoria. And her article, which is really pretty, look at the cover of this. Maternal Misgivings, from Ambivalent to Monstrous Mothers in Horror. So you did such a fun article and kind of expose on different archetypes of mothers in horror films, starting with Carrie and then going up to more contemporary work. So first of all, why horror? Why are you so into horror films? What's the connection for you?
Horror films are just really fun.
They are. It's true.
But I wrote the article as a tribute to my mother. She recently passed away, and horror was something that she shared with me.
Really? How old were we when she was sharing horror with you?
Maybe a little too young, like
Yeah.
5-ish.
I'm like, I still get scared.
Absolutely.
Well, now it's because it feels too real.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit different tone, but how was it for you as a kid watching with her? What would you guys do?
We would just cut down the lights, put on something spooky. We used to take naps together, wake up, watch a horror movie, go back to sleep. That was our routine.
Why do you think horror was her thing then, if she was the one introducing you to it?
I mean, as a mother.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, as a mother, the horrors always persist. My mom was also an immigrant, so new to this country. So
where does she come from?
Bermuda.
Bermuda.
So definitely just a way to cope and a way to connect with her kids.
You're introducing two archetypes of mothers from the horror genres. You have monstrous mothers and you have ambivalent mothers. Can you tell us a little bit about those two genres and what they mean to you?
Absolutely, yeah. So motherhood is great horror fodder, as you know. I think it's something that we can all connect to, our relationships with our mothers. Even though I loved my mother, we spent a lot of time together watching horror movies. We didn't always have the best relationship, and through those movies, I was able to grieve my loss and just reconnect and understand her better, just how hard motherhood can be. So the monstrous mother is how it sounds. The mother is usually the villain, the antagonist of the story, preventing the protagonist or the main character from doing whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
And you see that a lot in horror movies in the 70s and 80s. You think Mrs. Voorhees, Friday the 13th, Margaret White's the archetype of that. And then as we move towards present day, women's rights, we see more of an ambivalent mother figure. Women who are struggling with the idea of motherhood, whether or not they want to become mothers. And
sounds familiar. I think a lot of people are having that conversation these days.
Absolutely. And all of the bullshit that comes with that, the decision to not be a mother is also as horrific as being a mother.
Why do you think that is? I feel like there's so much pressure on us in society to feel like we're not really fulfilled women unless we become mothers. Mm-hmm. And so, for some women who actually do want to do that, or who maybe grow up with secure attachment in their own families and good examples of what parents and like a safe family are, it might not be much of a question mark. It might just feel like perfectly natural and something we want to do. But I think for a lot of women, and maybe even women who grew up in those circumstances, we are, like you just described, there's been much more of an awakening to the realities of motherhood.
Yeah.
It's not just like TikToks and the spread of information that way. I think just because we have more options now as women, finally, as we're starting to unburden ourselves, more and more from patriarchy and like these rules and these oppressions, more and more women are questioning whether or not it is in fact our role or something that they even want.
Right. I think there's like an illusion of choice there, because even as women, either choice to be a mother or not feels like the wrong choice.
Do you feel like it feels wrong because of what society's telling you or because of something inside of you?
Definitely because what society's telling you, because society is always pushing like, oh, the nuclear family, 2-parent household, 2.5 children. But the way, well, we're American, like the way American society is set up right now, we can't support that. We can't support the American dream financially. In the pandemic, I was a policy analyst for the city.
Oh, right.
Yes. I just oversaw the Brooklyn Borough President's education agenda.
Okay.
And I'd been in that job for like 5 months before the pandemic started.
Oh my God.
So my job was shaped by the pandemic, like supporting schools, educational organizations, and helping these children still learn somehow. And I just saw like how burdened mothers were. Like,
oh my God.
We talk about the second shift a lot, like when women have to like clock out of their jobs and then clock into being a mom.
A mom and a wife.
And a wife.
And a house cleaner and a laundry doer and everything else. All of that domestic labor and household labor.
Exactly. And like you have it all, but like at what cost?
Exhaustion and misery.
And then on the other side of that, like being...
Sorry, that's just... I'm like tired thinking about it.
Same.
Yeah,
That's why I don't have children right now. And on the other side of that, like, I'm in my 30s now. I don't have children, and everybody's like, when are you having children? When are you having children? And people will say like, oh, who's going to take care of you when you're older? Things like that. So
do you find it surprising when you hear things like that coming from people, particularly from other women? Like, do you find it surprising how ingrained their own kind of patriarchy and misogyny is as reflected by those questions? Like that they would assume, like, one, that it's not something personal, two, that there aren't a lot of, that's like the only option, like you're saying, you have one or the other, and that three, it actually works out as some like storybook thing where, oh, as long as you have them, they'll be there forever for you and love you and it'll just work out like, again, a Disney movie. Do you find that like people telling you who they are a little bit?
I'm not really surprised. I'm from the South, so...
You're like, it's baked into the
I
game.
mean, I wasn't married by 22 and everybody's like, what's happening?
Are your family all mostly in Norfolk still, or in that area?
Yeah, in Virginia, yeah. So, like, the idea is, like, you go to school to find a husband, you get married, you have children. So I'm not really surprised that that's always been, like, parroted by the women in my family. But and my mother was pretty frank about, like, the difficulties of motherhood.
I was going to ask, was she one of those voices for you who was like pushing you in the direction of having kids, or was her showing you horror films at a young age, like her being like, yo, know this too?
My mother was really interesting and fascinating. She loved being a mom, but she was always like, it's so hard. And I know like the age gap was a hard thing for her.
How old was she when she had you? Was
36.
36. Back then,
yeah.
That's kind of not older, but it's not young.
Right. So she's raising like a 4 or 5 year old in like her 40s.
Yeah.
And I just remember growing up, she was just like, well, don't be like me. Like she hated being a stay-at-home mom. She liked being independent and like working, but she felt like she needed to be in the home.
Was that like a I don't know how privy you were to this as a kid, but was that a financial decision on her part? Because so many women don't really feel like they have an option once they actually have kids because it's so expensive to actually have someone watch your young children while you're at work. Or was it for her more a question of just like wanting to be out and having her own life or not being financially dependent or something along that line?
She definitely pushed like independence. Like I said, she was an immigrant, so it was hard, like, I guess, assimilating into American society, like, and legally too. The legal challenges of immigration.
Oh my God, that's like a job.
And she loved being at home and being with me, but she also like, I remember talking to her about it. She also liked her independence. So she was really excited. Like when I finally went off to college, she's like, I'm free. I can do whatever I want now.
Yeah.
With the ambivalent mother trope, there's this idea that there's like some absence. Like those women, those three women were fulfilled. They were career women.
Right.
In Clock, she was a designer. She was a well-known interior designer, and she was happy. But everybody kept telling her that
You're gonna regret it.
you're gonna regret it. She's almost 40. Like, oh my God, your life's over, right?
Yeah.
So she goes to do this, become part of a trial experiment to like fix her internal clock, which I thought was pretty interesting.
It was an IVF or no?
No, it was like a fictionalized like women's clinic where like they fix these women, these women's internal clocks, like
Getting hot.
yes, like to flip the switch for like a desire to have children because she just didn't have it.
Well, you heard my little speech before. I'm like, fuck flipping a switch. Pay me. Write me a check.
Absolutely. And with the Bone Women, I think the movie leaned more into like what it meant to be like bisexual and like in a straight passing marriage and like all the obstacles that come with that.
The identity issue too. I
Yeah.
think a lot of women, certainly ones I talk to, struggle with that idea of like, who am I going to be when I take on this added identity of mother? Because I think people understand it is going to be very consuming, certainly while the babies are young, you know, until you can start getting them to school and having some of that taken off your own plate, even if you have help. And so, like, who am I after I have a kid? I'm the mother. And this is something I was thinking about a lot in my own life. Like, I don't think I've ever... I think at a very young age, I don't know if you had this experience, I think I identified mother, like being a mother, motherhood, as this, like, what's the way to say it? I could tell that at the same time that society was relishing it and saying, like, this is the best and most important thing you could do, I could see that at the same time, American society, people, they fucking hate mothers.
Absolutely.
The way we have all this set up, the way we just abandon people to have kids, that we're like, oh, good luck, no preschool, no daycare, no health insurance, no nothing, and you're so freaking abandoned. And there you are, you did this thing that society told you to do, and now you're so vulnerable, you're so dependent, it's really hard, besides just the physical exhaustion of having small children and all of the new decisions you have to make and wrestling with who you are and your own identity things, just not even having time to yourself. There's no time to not be a mother.
And
it's
my
like
mother,
it takes over.
Yeah, and my mother supported other children in our family. I have a huge family.
Oh yeah, so they did the real community, like everybody's helping out thing.
Yeah, and she was seen as like a mother figure to like a bunch of my cousins. I have over 100 cousins.
Oh my God.
Yes. And when she passed, like...
No wonder she was tired.
Yeah, she was tired. And when she passed, like, some of my cousins were like, wow, like, she was like my second mother.
Yeah.
And she was like a real pillar in our family that we lost. But at the same time, I just knew how tired she was. And I also knew that I didn't want that for myself, yeah.
It's a lot to give that much of yourself.
I always felt kind of odd. Like, I never... Like growing up, you know, playing with baby dolls and like, I don't know if I want to do this. And like, I didn't dream of like a wedding, even though I'm married. Like,
yeah, that's
just not it.
Yeah, I think I was in a similar boat there too.
Yeah.
I just want to look to one of the things that you wrote in this because I have a paragraph underlined. It's this question you posed that a lot of people are asking you, and it's, is it worth it? May I read you to you?
Yes, please. I'm always surprised people read what I write.
I underline. I'm a scribbler. And I quote, all of the unsolicited commentary on child rearing more or less boils down to, is it worth it? And I think it's true. That's what we're all analyzing with ourselves, with this exploration of like, do I want to take on this role of mother? Do I want to go through motherhood? Do I want to do it in a place that we described that doesn't really support you in any way? Do we want to dedicate that much of ourselves and our identities to this, at least certainly for years in these early stages? And you write, but is it worth it? I'm constantly reminded of my duty to reproduce, but is it something I would find worthwhile? Am I worthless without children? These questions haunt me regularly, but what actually keeps me up at night is the fear of replicating my mom's mistakes. There is a non-zero chance that I will irrevocably fuck up a human being I made. It's honestly no wonder that so many horror films have been fueled by the concept of motherhood and the trauma of giving birth. Is that idea of replicating generational trauma, or just, like you said, irrevocably fucking someone up, something that scares you?
Absolutely. I think that's why I'm drawn to horror too, like exploring like these deep questions and these interpersonal relationships that we have with like our mothers and like other interpersonal relationships, like through the fantastical. And that's definitely something, I don't know, intentionally or not, that my mother instilled in me, like through our love of horror films, just like seeing like fucked up women and dealing with the consequences of their choices. And motherhood is thankfully a choice for me, and one that I'm not sure that I'm going to make anytime soon. Something about me, like pregnancy, like the actual act of pregnancy is terrifying,
Why does it hurt? I'm kidding.
I just, you hear all these horror stories like, oh, your organs shift and like your pelvis drops and everything can go wrong. And especially with the Black maternal health decline, really.
Yeah, the maternal death rate, which is
the death
only
rate,
increasing right now in the United States. Hello.
Absolutely. I'm just like, I can adopt a 5-year-old. It's fine. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add about your article? I thought I did.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. Everyone pick it up. It's really beautiful. You can order the back issues. It's also, Fangoria is also stocked in some cool bookshops and comic shops. So you can find on their website some places that you can pick it up in the city and maybe even at local bookstores near you. I thought maybe, if I may, I'd finish with like a Bell Hooks quote about motherhood and children, because Mama Bear Bell Hooks always does it right. Look what I did with my notes.
Absolutely.
Mom! No, I'm kidding.
Oh, I guess I would want to say that like I love that horror allows women to be monstrous and ambivalent and complicated.
Good point. We didn't talk about that. How like they actually get to be complicated and sophisticated and multidimensional characters because of the genre. Yeah. As opposed to what like romantic comedies or just like the mom afterthought in some other movie or show. Yeah, they get to be antagonists. It's true. I like it. I'll read 2 quick things. These are both from Bell Hooks and Feminism is for Everybody. We were talking about the term earlier that Bell coined, white supremacist capitalist Christian patriarchy. So she writes, within white supremacist capitalist Christian patriarchal cultures of domination, children do not have rights. So that's, I think, another thing that's a part of the antagonism in these movies as well. The kids, you're trapped at home a lot of times. Certainly if you grow up in places that are transportationally disadvantaged, where you're just isolated in the home. I grew up like that. There was no leaving the house. Like, it was torture.
Right. Children are an underclass.
They're an underclass. And similarly, she writes, children need to be raised in loving environments. Whenever domination is present, love is lacking. I think Carrie would concur.
Absolutely. And we saw the consequences of that.
We did. A lot of blood. A lot of hellfire. Well, JENIKA, thank you for your interview. Do you want to stick around for hot tea, where we're going to rant a little bit, get a little spicy, get a little warm, see our blood boil over some issues this week? Okay, great. Thank you, JENIKA. And we'll be back after a quick break with hot tea. God.
Tea with a cup of tea.
Tea time.
Tea.
What's the tea, sis?
No tea, no shade.
Hot tea.
Tea.
Queens.
All right, guys, it's time for... Oh, look at that. Rockwell's excited. It's time for what you've been waiting for. It's time for hot tea. More bitching. Here we go. It's time to hear all about the stuff that's been making our blood boil this week and the prior weeks. JENIKA, what you got this week? What's been making you insane?
Other than Trad Wives,
oh God,
have you heard? Speaking of Trad Wives, have you heard of?
We can speak of them.
Did you hear about Lauren Southern?
Who's Lauren Southern again?
So Lauren Southern is an alt-right political pundit. Definitely an anti-feminist, anti-immigrant, anti-intellectual.
And she's got guns. I saw a little bit of the gun toting. Like, oh, look at me in my hot pants and my AK. It's like,
Right. She was more prominent in the
Read a book.
2010s.
Yeah.
But
In the
she
2010s?
in the 2010s, yeah.
So she's an OG, okay.
Yeah, but she left like the public life in 2019
Why?
to be a wife and a mother, a traditional wife and mother.
How's that going for her?
It's going poorly.
Oh, shocking.
She recently came out and said that
She's gay?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately
That's a
not. She came out to say that trad wifedom is slavery. And now she's a single mother back in Canada.
What do you mean? You're working all the time, you're on deck, you're giving to everybody else, you're getting nothing in return, and you're not getting paid, and you can't escape it. Yeah, sounds pretty slavey to me.
So yeah, like now she's rallying the other conservative, miserable trad wives as well.
Oh, so wait, so is Lauren Southerland like a version of like, I used to be full alt-right, like all the supremacists, but now I'm like, in one way, maybe in this like reformist, like just at least economical way, trying to be like a little more pro-femme because I'm sick of being dependent? Is that
No,
it?
it's like trouble came to her doorstep and then she realized her mistake. Yeah.
Is she owning it though? Is she like, you said she's encouraging traditional wives to what, like abandon it?
To support each other or just to like, wake up to the lie of traditional femininity and motherhood and
well, what
trad
does
wife.
she propose as like a solution then?
Nothing. She's still an anti-feminist.
That's helpful. Oh, hello. Emma's a feminist. Meow. She's gonna ruin the flowers. Don't you dare. Come here. Come here. Be a good girl.
But what
Be a good girl.
But what pisses me off about that is just like we've already been through this, like
we've done
Betty
this
Friedan.
experiment. Yeah, second wave. We know that this is. I mean, it sounds like that's all she's really realizing. Then she's like, oh, I can't be doing all of that traditional work, that household labor for free.
And that's something like with the patriarchy, like we don't value the work at home.
Of course not. No, there's no compensation, and it's like. And especially nowadays where it's so expensive to even exist, let alone support dependents and family, it's like you need to have like almost a 5-income earner household to survive and to be able to like grow financially. It's just preposterous that we wouldn't have childcare and like basic family care and family planning. Like if you have elderly parents too, it works both ways. Dependents can be younger, they can be older. Like how are you're not getting money in the door? How are you affording all of this?
Yeah. And I don't fault her for being like taken in with like the romanticization of being a stay-at-home mom and baking cookies in your little apron or whatever.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I would do that too if it weren't like a catastrophe in terms of a life strategy.
If my husband were a millionaire, yeah, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I'd be like, first of all, transfer half of your wealth to me. And now I have my like equal income as I contribute to this household.
Right.
Have you seen this as like another thing that I've seen floating around the interwebs going to what I was just talking about where, I don't know if it's necessarily coming from the trad wife community, but there are women who are counseling other women who want to be stay-at-home wives and mothers and do all that household labor. They're like, do that, but get a prenup where you're having the man sign over a portion of his money in real time into an account or into some kind of funds that only you have access to and that you legally and contractually have as your money. And then it makes more sense economically. I mean, you're still dependent on the spouse then as the income earner.
Right.
Like, should they be fired or should anything go wrong there, you're pretty fucked. But I mean, when is that not true? But that almost makes more sense to me. I still don't like it because you're still dependent on one individual who has this control over you. There's a control and power imbalance there I don't like. But there's at least an economic kind of readjustment or...
I'm definitely pissed off and scared about like the rise of hypergamy.
Hypergamy, tell us all about it.
So hypergamy is the idea of essentially like marrying up. So like women,
Gold digger.
yeah, gold digger essentially, but like
gold diggering.
Yes. Just the idea of like marrying up, like marrying in like a higher social class or things like that. So like you see on TikTok now, like women are just looking for sugar daddies or, like the trad wife lie.
Yeah, different versions of it.
Just wanting to be taken care of and just like seeing that and like we're losing our rights, like the downfall of Roe v. Wade, like this rise of conservatism. Like I understand like wanting to protect yourself as a woman, like financially, but like becoming financially dependent on a man.
You're still financially dependent on it.
Yeah.
You're not changing that system or that power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's really scary. And I also don't like that idea of marrying up because, like you said, it belies this class supremacy issue.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're basically acknowledging and saying, oh, I want to marry up. It's like, I don't want to be poor because being poor is inferior in this pyramidal capitalist supremacist structure.
Right.
And it's like, so what then? Fuck poor people? Fuck those people. It's totally cool if we concentrate all our money as long as I don't have to be the one that doesn't have any. That's such bullshit. It's so exploitative. Exploitative.
Yeah, and the whole idea that poor people shouldn't have children and things like that, like, it's terrible.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting.
And another thing we didn't talk about with that whole trend is like it's so classist in another way. There's not just that sense of like climbing or whatever, marrying up so that you can position your status at a higher level. What is that word again? Hypergamy?
Hypergamy.
I haven't heard that in a while. Hypergamy.
It's that gender studies degree.
There you go. Put it to use. It's not just an issue of hypergamy. It's also, if you're going to be a traditional wife, like there are two versions of that. And this was what a lot of reformist feminism was built on. It was built on the backs of outsourcing a lot of that domestic labor to other women. So now these other women are not only doing your dirty work so that you can like be stay at home and be a little like palace princess or house princess. They also have to go home and do their shit. And raising your kids is time away from raising their kids. And there's just such a like, again, a whole like fuck the poor people, fuck the people below me mentality to it. And I also don't like how it's presented in this whole like MAGA, this nostalgic like, oh, this is how it used to be. Like that was some status quo. Women have been working always.
Women have always been working, especially like women of color, like black women. I see all these trends on TikTok, like these women are like anti-feminists, like we were lied to, like I hate working.
And they're trying. I think they're mostly trying to be funny.
No, it's not working. So,
it's not working.
And it's just like, just think of like all the women that like died, like all the women, all the black people, people of color that died for you to have your rights, like that died for you to have the right to choose if you wanted to be a mother or not.
Yeah.
Like, that died to make sure you had a credit card. Like women weren't allowed to have a credit card until like what, the 70s?
70s. That was part of the second wave. Yeah.
Right.
It's I think that's a really good point. The disrespect at root in that. There's a disrespect for our foremothers who went, like you said, sacrificed their lives. And I get trying to make jokes and like, yeah, work can be boring, but make sure you're keeping your eye on the prize with the cause here. Yeah. Like, I think that's something that happens a lot on social media. You've probably seen all the spin out, like people trying to be funny or trying to be like, I have something so interesting to say. And it's like, you're not doing the work you think you're doing. You're reinforcing a lot of toxic shit. And it's not funny. And it's not cute.
It's not cute. And like the enemy is capitalism.
Yeah.
You want to be independent. Like you definitely want to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, the enemy being capitalism. The last thing you want to do is just have more people controlling you, being farther away from owning your own means of production.
Right.
Outro, take one.
All right, and that is the Queen's Tea for this week, Mother's Day. We should applaud ourselves. This is our first episode. I want to thank our special tea party guest, JENIKA McCRAYER, and our amazing production team, including Bash Ortega, Kira Miles, Danny Kelly, Zoe Hanna, and Annie Chin, and lastly to my beautiful babies, our emotional support animals, Rockwell the Pooch, who's over there napping now, finally, and little Miss MCAD, who's asleep on the script. She's our new script supervisor. I'm sorry, Bash. We're going to have to upgrade you to something else. But thank you so much for joining us. Follow us on all the platforms, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on all the social media bullshit, including Instagram, TikTok, and of course, Discord, at thequeenstea.media. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you on June 2nd for our Pride episode. Happy Pride. Happy Mother's Day. Ooh, and then we'll do Safety Sheep.